Kyle. Welcome to a special episode of Grad Missions Office Hours. I'm joined today by Jessica Stewart of the Stagecraft Nerd. Thanks so much for
Cool.
joining us, Jessica.
Thank you for having me. A pleasure to be here.
So this may seem like an odd bedfellows kind of situation. You're wondering, what does med and law school admissions have to do with theater? And Jessica and I are here to answer that question for you.
Absolutely. My name is Jessica. I've been a theater educator for the last 10 years. I've worked with students as young as 5 years old all the way up to eighth grade. And I have had the wonderful experience of educating students, not just in the craft of theater performance, but also in stage management, design, technology, craftsmanship, and being able to introduce students to all of the different disciplines that are encompassed in theater. I have my degree, my personal degree is in theater, dance, and performance studies from UC Berkeley with honors. And I've studied at the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco and the American Musical Dramatic Academy in New York City. And currently I work with the Civic Theater in Carmel, Indiana, with their junior program where I get to teach kiddos everything about theater.
So I think this conversation really sparked from me loving your content on socials. First of all, if you're not following the Stagecraft Nerd, you should be. And as it started from a mom standpoint, I have a theater kid. She's 19, and theater saved her life. She was a kid who COVID really interpersonally it hit for her in seventh grade, and she just had a really hard time finding her space until high school. Freshman year, she found the theater department. She got
Okay.
involved in advanced acting in Aegis English, which is where they wrote the one act plays, directed them, performed them, and her confidence just soared. She found her people, and they are the nerdiest group of humans, lovely. Many of them have gone on to be pre med, to be pre law. And I just started paying attention to the kind of things that they cared about and that were important to them. I'm in a unique position where parents of future doctors and lawyers come to me and they say, how can I get my seventh grader ready to go to med school? How can I truly, because it's such a process to get in. It's never been more competitive to get into law school. Med school's always been competitive. And the thing that I say to them that makes me a little different, I think, than a lot of advisors in this space is put them in the arts.
Hmm.
Let them do the things they want to do. I had a conversation last week with a mom whose kid does aerial gymnastics, and she's like, does she need to stop in high school so that she can get ready to be a doctor? Absolutely not. No,
No, no, stay
no,
with
she
it.
should not. So I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on some of the building blocks that happen in the arts for these high achieving students.
Absolutely. So I feel like I'm also in a very unique position in that I get to see a lot of my students, many students that started when with my program when they were 5, go through middle school. And then when they get to high school, we've created such a connection and such a rapport that many of them actually come back to me upon high school graduation. I've had many, many students. So our school has a tradition of high school seniors on graduation day come back to our middle school and walk through the campus to kind of be like, oh,
Oh,
goodbye middle school, goodbye childhood. And most of my students literally come back to my building, which is a separate building, the theater, and say goodbye to me. And
mm,
this last year, I had this beautiful picture of like all of my students flanked next to me, and they were all my past theater students. But what stood out to me is how many chords and how many achievements they had in high school. Of course, they had their theater chord from all their participation in high school theater, but all the other things that they were involved in as well, all of the other different areas that they excelled in and succeeded in. And it started in middle school and it started with theater. So as far as like the areas that I feel are the strongest areas that we really work with, I had to make a list because like I seriously I was thinking about this question earlier. I'm like, this is a task and this is a skill. These are all things that we work on in theater. So I forgive me for reading off of my notes here, but here's what I think are the most transferable skills, if you will. So,
Mm.
first and foremost, we teach communication to students right off the bat. There's communication. We work under pressure. We teach leadership. We teach how to be present in the moment with the person that you're talking to, which is kind of a lost skill in of itself. Commanding presence within the room. Empathy is a huge one for us. We
Mm.
do connect, obviously, we're trying to connect our characters with the audience, and having that sense of empathy is important. I'll come back to that in a moment. Having voice control, organization, I'll also come back to this one in a second because I think that a lot of your students are probably organization freaks, maybe perhaps with all of their work. And so one of the skills that we do learn a lot in theater is organization. And let's see, time management skills. That is a
Ooh.
huge, huge, huge one. Working as a team, of course, and flexibility. If nothing else, theater kiddos know how to think on their feet when something goes wrong, not letting it crush them, and then moving forward to fix it. So those are all the things that immediately stood out for me as the skills that we learn in theater that help with, it doesn't matter if it's med school or law school, any kind of career path afterwards. I don't know if that answers your question. I feel like I may have gone off a tangent.
Jessica, so many of the items that you just read of those skills and well, they're skills. It's skills that
Yeah.
you need to learn are exactly aligned with the double AMC core competencies for pre-medicine.
Oh, wow.
Like they're exactly the core resilience, communication, um,
Mhm.
that ability to when things don't go right to bob and weave and make a new plan. I mean, that is emergency medicine right there, right?
That's emergency medicine. I'm sure that's law, and that is definitely theater. So I can only speak for my experiences in theater, but I can guarantee you that nothing ever goes right. We always, so it's not like, did we have a perfect show? It's what didn't go wrong this time. And it's not that the
Mm.
whole show was a disaster, but there's always a list of this didn't go right, this cue was off, this person was off, this zipper didn't work. And what I love about teaching kids at a young age is, okay, it went wrong. What are you going to do about it? Don't
Mm.
melt down. How are you going to fix it?
Yes.
And we can look back on every show and go, "Oh man, do you remember when that person got sick backstage or that person broke their ankle after that scene?" And we laugh at it, but it didn't destroy the show. It didn't destroy the kids. And that's one thing that I absolutely love about theater is the resilience factor.
Resilience.
Absolutely. But like I wanted to go back and talk about, if you don't mind, uh,
Please.
how theater helps. I feel like people immediately think theater and they think performers. And a lot of people think, well, I'm not a performer. I don't want to be on stage singing and dancing. Totally get it. But that's such a tiny facet of theater. That's the outward version of theater, of course. That's what we see. But it's all of the other elements to theater that probably many of your students could benefit from, right? So
Mm.
it's not just learning how to sing and dance and be on stage. That is a whole thing in and of itself. Being able to speak, of course, being able to communicate to people. But there's also the skills in leadership and management and organization that happen in time management that happen behind the scenes that I think really prepare people for any kind of professional career outside of performance.
Mhm.
A lot of my most successful students were actually stage managers first. And their job literally was to manage the entire production. If you're not familiar with the job of a stage manager is, it's actually probably one of the most rewarding, but the most stressful jobs in theater. So second in line to the director is the stage manager. The director, of course, has the vision. I want a purple sky and I want corn stalks over here. I want a big dragon over there. And the stage manager's job is to have their binder with the script, all the little tabs labeled nice and neatly and have everything highlighted and all the little pockets with all the different notes that they're taking. And their job is to take notes on every single thing that happens in the show. Who comes in, who puts down a prop, when did the curtains open, when is the light, everything that happens on stage. The stage manager is taking care of every single detail during the rehearsal process. So they're kind of in the background. The director's directing, and the director will say, "Okay, take down this note," and they're take down the note. And then once the show is mounted and show starts, the director usually backs off. I certainly did. I backed off. And during the performances, the stage managers run everything. Right? So they're the ones
Mm.
with the headsets on, and they're the ones that are calling all the shots and all the cues. And so that is no different than I'm imagining a surgeon, being in that surgery room and conducting everything that's happening.
They even call it a surgical theater,
It's called a
Jessica.
surgical theater for a reason, right? And you have your surgeon, and I'm sure you have your secondary surgeon. I don't know what the titles are. And you'll have all of your nurses, all of your other people in the room that are all working in concert for
That's
this
right.
one goal.
That's
And
right.
if something goes wrong, you have to be able to keep your calm, composure, and continue on with the second plan to fix whatever just went wrong. But stage managers, all of my stage managers that I've gotten to see through their high school career have gone on to non-theater roles, but have gone on to, I've had a few gone into Ivy League schools, and they have a sense of composure to them and a
Mm.
sense of posture to them that is really amazing to see, especially since I knew them when they were like in sixth grade, many of these kiddos. But leadership, such an incredible skill to learn in theater. Organization, all of that stems from that time management. We have an opening night, and you're either prepared or you're not. And there's nothing gets you more prepared for that opening night than realizing a week beforehand, oh, you have 7 days left to the show and all of this still needs to be done. We got to hustle. We got to hurry. You need some help. I'm going to help you. I need some help. You can help me. So all of that gets really, really like embedded into our muscle memory, right? It just becomes second nature. How do I fix this problem? How do I help you out? We've got curtains opening in 30 minutes. What else do we need to do? Right? And what I love about it all is that no one loses their mind. I mean, we all lose our mind in a way because it's stressful, but it's an enjoyable loss of mind, if that's a crazy thing to say.
Mhm. The
But
show
yes,
must go on.
the show must go on, and that's phrased for a reason because
Yeah.
whether or not you're prepared, that curtain is going to go up.
Mm.
And of course,
Yes.
working as a team, flexibility, that's a big one. That's a big one.
Yeah,
I feel like
it
I rambled
is.
on. I hope I wasn't rambling.
No, that wasn't rambling at all. I think you hit so many of the facets that I think you're helping me make a case to parents and
Mhm.
to high achievers that they can be involved in the arts and like here are the benefits that you didn't even know.
Oh, yeah.
I want to take a couple of minutes and talk about communication
Yes.
because right before we hopped on, we talked about how in medicine, in law, in theater, communication is it's the cornerstone of doing any of those things well. Think about when you've been at the doctor and they're trying to communicate a care plan to you or a diagnosis, right? Like think about delivering a cancer diagnosis to a
Hmm.
patient.
Hmm.
There's a little bit of theater there.
Oh,
Think
yeah.
about delivering opening arguments or closing arguments,
Oh, yeah.
oral arguments in any capacity in the courtroom.
Very dramatic.
All of those things are composure and communication. So,
Mhm.
tell me a little bit about when you said that communication was the key to theater. I was like, oh, this is perfect. We can just camp out here.
Communication, I think, not only in the words that we say, but how we say them, right?
Mm,
One thing that we learn in acting is what, let me rephrase that. One of my favorite activities that I do with my students is something called an open scene. And open scenes are very, very short phrases. It's a scene that's comprised of maybe like 4 lines of dialogue altogether. And the words are open because they're open to interpretation. So there's no detail, there's no character names, there's no setting. It's just words like, what? And how you interpret those words will communicate what your
mm,
intent is. So being able to say what, you can say the word what 10 different ways and mean 10 different things. It's the same word, but how you communicate matters. So being able to understand how you come across to other people is very important. So in theater, we talk about how you say the words that you have on your paper to communicate what it is that you're trying to communicate.
mm.
You also use that communication within your body, right? How do you
Ooh.
communicate professionalism versus I'm just gonna hang out, right?
Mhm.
Being able to compose your body communicates to an audience something as well. We want to communicate in theater, we want to communicate a story to the audience, and that's important. And communication is important in law. Of course, you're trying to communicate your point to the judge and to the jury. all of the details of the case that you have put together. You want to be able to communicate that, hopefully well enough to where they see your side of the argument. And of course, as we said in the exam room, you want to be able to communicate empathy, hopefully empathy because of a diagnosis, or hope in case of, a better diagnosis. I don't know the words yet. But I think communication is something that we are lacking a lot now because of technology, because of short attention spans. We tend to speak now in, I don't want to say in text mode, but you know how everything just seems quicker and more abbreviated. It's harder to communicate full thought, full
It's more
sentence, full
transactional
emotion.
and less relational.
Exactly. That's a great way of putting it. It is transactional. It is less relational. And we really try in theater, obviously we're acting, but we try to observe the real world and we try to replicate it as authentically as best as we can
Mhm.
in a very artificial world. So we stand in an artificial space, a set, and we have to communicate authenticity as best as we can so that our audience can understand our story. And I
Yeah,
guess in a sense, it's not much different than being in an exam room or being in a courtroom. You're in a setting and you're trying to communicate, authentically communicate with another group of people, a point, a thought, um, and trying to, I don't want to say try to get them to see your side, but certainly trying to get them to see your side of things, your point of things. And that communication can be, if there's no authenticity, if there's no humanity, if there's no empathy, it can seem, like you said, transactional. It can be very clinical. It can be
yes.
very procedural. And then you lose the people. If we're talking about law, you're losing the jury who isn't very procedurally minded. They might be
Hmm.
more empathetic to a character that is sitting at that table or a
That's right.
character in that case, so to speak. And we as patients, we want to be seen by our doctor. So we want them to be able to communicate to us what feels like on a person to person basis, as opposed to I'm just a client or I'm just a patient. You know what I mean?
That's right. That's right.
So being able to
Absolutely.
communicate with that empathy, even if it's fake empathy, even if it's fake, sometimes you just have to fake it, and that's
That's
fine.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
So I think we've done a really good job of talking about the end game outcomes of
Mhm.
incorporating theater into your lives as a future doctor and lawyer. What we are concerned about here at Grad Missions is getting
Mhm.
you over that admissions hurdle.
Oh,
A
yes.
big component of the admissions decision comes down to how you present in an interview. This is true at
Mhm.
top law schools. This is true at every med school.
Mhm.
And being able to present your intellectual firepower and promise as a future doctor or lawyer with the right level of warmth. So it is, we kind of think of it as a triangle of competence and
Mhm.
warmth. And you have to have equal parts of both in order for that to have the kind of outcomes that you want. So before you can get to that surgical theater, before you can get to that courtroom or that boardroom, if you're doing more transactional law, you have to be admitted to your law and med school.
Mhm.
So, do you have advice for people who are going to be interviewing with med schools and law schools and how they can kind of compose themselves?
Absolutely. So interviews are exactly the same as auditions.
Ooh,
And theater kiddos, I'm going to say we are really good at interviews. I'm
yes.
going to be a little bit proud of of our group of people because we tend to be really good at interviews. And the reason why
Yes.
we're good at interviews is because we have spent most of our time going on auditions. Every time we want to be in a show, audition, audition, audition. And when we're not auditioning, we take classes on how to audition. Tomorrow, I'm teaching a class on how to audition and preparing students with the monologue piece of an audition. And so,
Mm,
one thing that theater students do really, really well is interviews because we spend so much time preparing for that interview. So while your students might be thinking, okay, I might have one interview coming up or two interviews coming up, I might only need to prepare once or twice for them. We've been preparing for years, right? Constant interviews or constant auditions prepare us for those interviews. I joke around with my husband because when I have to apply for a new job, he's like, "Aren't you nervous? Don't you have to do this?" I'm like, "I got this." So I'm so used to doing all of these steps that I'm going to talk about in a second that by the time I get to my audition, it's not a thing. I already know I got the job, right? So
Yes.
it's the confidence of preparation. And
Mm.
when I get new students coming into theater and they say, "Oh, I want to join the show. How do I do it?" And I say, "Okay, you have to audition." "All right, what do I do?" And I go, "There's a whole bunch of stuff that you got to do. You can't just show up." Preparation, preparation, preparation. So in theater, and I'll try to translate it into your students' world in a second, but in theater, the first thing that I tell my students is know the show. So that means don't audition for a show if you don't know the story. So if the show is Shrek, right? So my theater's doing Shrek in a few months. You might know the name of it. That's not enough. You need to know the show. So that means listen all to all the music. Listen
Mm.
to if you can find a performance of it, if you can find the text of it, if you can watch any other variations of it. So, for example, we've got Shrek the Musical, which is actual musical. There's also the cartoon, but there's also a book. So being able to know
Mm.
all the variations of it and coming to it prepared. So in your world, that might mean know the school. So don't
Yes.
just know the name of the school, go and research statistics of that particular school. Who do they serve after they go to their program, right?
I have them
Understand.
follow the schools on socials
Yes,
because
yes.
that's
Follow the schools
really
on.
how they get to know them.
Absolutely. I tend to go online and follow the shows. Like there'll be productions and there'll be behind the scenes rehearsal videos of the Broadway production. And so I just like immerse myself in that production. So get to know the show, very, very important. That also means getting to know the tone and the genre of the show. So, not just knowing the plot and the characters and the music, but it's also understanding the tone and the genre. So, you can have musicals that are very animated, like Shrek or Frozen, but you can have some that are really dark, like Sweeney Todd, which are Victorian and dark and murderous. And so, you don't want to conflate, even though they're both musical theater, you don't want to conflate your audition material with those two tones because they won't make sense. You won't get cast. So I guess for your group, also understanding the personality of the school. So maybe the personality of the type of law that is that is practiced there, or maybe even the personality or the tone of the instructors, the professors, getting to know what kind of law do they practice, or where did they go to school? What is their strength? Getting to know the personality, so to speak, of that particular spot. So we always do prepare by researching the show, get to know the show, getting to know the tone of the show, having appropriate audition material. So, for us, appropriate audition material means that you are not singing a song from Little Mermaid to audition for something like Sweeney Todd because it is not transferable. Even though the notes might be there, it doesn't show us your skills. Or even worse, when I get students that come in with a song that they really love, like they'll sing currently Defying Gravity from Wicked is really popular. So singing Defying Gravity, if you can't hit those notes, it's going to highlight that you can't hit those notes. Even though you
Mm.
love that song, it's very popular, it's not the appropriate material for that audition. You have to pick something that sits really comfortably in your comfort zone. In other words, highlight your skills and not your weaknesses. So for law or for medicine, um, don't I don't want to say don't overachieve, but don't use anything in your application or in your interview that isn't really appropriate for your skill set. So
That's right.
maybe
That's
I'm
right.
not quite sure how to translate that
Well,
specifically.
it's, maybe if you shadowed a cardiothoracic surgeon, but most of your hands dirty patient experience was in pediatrics. Maybe
There you
let's
go.
talk more about your work with kids than
Exactly.
the 2 hour surgery that you shadowed.
Right. And we don't, because what I tell my students is we don't want to wow the directors. We want to show what you're capable of. So
Mm, gosh,
we're
that's
not
so
trying to make
good.
them go, wow, that is the next up and it's not America's next top, whatever. We're just looking at what do you have to offer? Even if what you have to offer is this, and you might be able to grow into this eventually, you're
Hmm.
not there yet. So focus on what your strengths are now.
I love what you said about an interview being an audition because you really are auditioning to be at that school for them to spend the next 3 to 4 years, 7, 8 years, training you up to become the future lawyer and the future doctor. A lot of times, by the time you've gotten to the interview process, it's just like a job, right? If you've
Mm-hmm.
gotten to the interview process, you are qualified to be at that school.
Hmm.
And now it's yours to lose. And that can feel like a lot of pressure. And so do you have any guidance on someone who does get those nerves before they go into these high stakes experiences?
Nerves is normal. Let's just normalize nerves. No, there's not a single person that doesn't get nervous. Even professional performers, they get nervous too. And it is just a physiological reaction to all of the stimuli of the situation. And that's normal and that's okay. And it's to be expected. And you're not going to go in. The only time you're not going to be nervous is if there's nothing at stake. But
Mm.
because we are walking into something that is high stakes, obviously your heart rate is going to go up and your palms are going to get a little clammy, and that's
My
okay.
armpits are prickly.
Exactly. And that's all part and parcel to the high stakes, the importance of what it is that you're about to walk into. And it's only when you're not feeling nervous that you should be worried, right? That means that you
Mm.
don't care. You don't care
Oof.
enough. So keep in mind that nerves mean you care, and there's ways to manage that nervousness. And it doesn't mean that you're not prepared. It doesn't mean that you're not qualified. It doesn't mean that you're not going to excel or succeed. It just means that you're putting a lot of emphasis on this particular moment. What I love about theater is that it really does help us perform under pressure constantly.
Mm.
And theater kind of helps us regulate that nervous system. We learn a lot about breathing and we spend a lot of time doing breathing exercises. So let's say that, for example, I'm not sure if you would want to do this specifically before your interview, but let me just say what we do. And I remember having a student 20 minutes before we go on. It wasn't even opening night. We were already running a couple of times. And right before opening that particular night, she was having an anxiety attack. She's like, I don't want to go on stage. I feel so nervous. She wasn't even a main character. She was just in the ensemble, but she was having a hard time breathing. And
Mm.
what we did, or what I did, as I laid her on the floor, was right there in the theater house right before any audience members came in. I'm like, okay, just lay on the floor and just sit there. And she just laid on the floor and looking at the ceiling. And I went and I grabbed a book and I just put the book right on her belly button. And I just said, okay, just lay there and breathe and watch the book go up to the ceiling and down to the floor. And that's all she did for a
Mm.
good 5 minutes. And it regulated her system. She was calm. And I asked her to sit up slowly because breathing intentionally can kind of make you a little lightheaded. And I said, okay,
Sure.
are you ready to go on now? Or do you want to take a few more moments? What's going on? She's like, no, I think I'm okay now. And
Mm.
so being nervous is just your body's response, again, of all of that stimuli. But it's something that you can control with breathing, with calm and quiet. And it's something that we practice regularly. And I think I
Mm.
mentioned this earlier, off recording, that we spend a lot of time in theater learning how to breathe, being able to activate our diaphragm, being able to fill our lungs to capacity, being able to speak clearly and to communicate clearly to others on stage and to our audiences as well. And so being nervous is not a bad thing. So
Yeah.
be comfortable in the nervousness of it. And ironically, I just remembered what it is that I forgot, and that was memorization. So believe it or not, that's what it was. So there you go.
That
So
is
the third
so
thing to being
ironic.
prepared for an interview and an audition is to memorize and not to forget that you have to memorize.
Yes. And some people are going to say, "Oh, well, that's not applicable to med and law school admissions." Yes, it is. We at Grad Missions work on really carefully curated elevator pitches so
Oh
that when
yeah.
your interviewer says, "Tell me about yourself," you can ramble off and it doesn't need to sound like you're reading it, but
Hmm.
it needs to sound true. But sometimes you might forget to hit these important parts if you haven't practiced it. And the way you get there is by doing lots of mock interviews, which is what we do here at Grad Missions. We
Absolutely.
practice it, and I actually send them a Zoom recording of their interviews. They can watch it back. They get a full transcript. They get a Likert scale score with a rubric of like what we need to do better. And being able to watch that back, some people are like, "Oh, this is so cringy, Autumn. I don't want to watch it." Well, that's
Yeah,
how you have to face those hard things to get over them. So there is some
absolutely.
memorization even in this
Yeah,
space.
absolutely. And for us, what I tell my students is you don't want, let's say it's an audition for a musical, you don't want to just kind of know the song or read it off of your
Mm,
phone. You want to know it so internally that it's just second nature.
yep.
And sometimes in our auditions, uh, they're impromptu. So they give you the audition material then and there, and you have to learn it right then and there, and they want to see how fast you learn it. And so being able to quickly memorize your work and then turn around and get direction from the director and then perform it right then and there.
Yes.
Sometimes that's what an audition is. So I can imagine that in an interview, they'll ask you a question and see how well you respond to that. So being able to turn around really quickly, maybe not obviously memorize that information, but know that you have maybe some information to pull from that you can respond to that question.
That's right. And that there's a direct medical component to that. There's an MMI style interview that is situational. And they'll say, let's
Right.
say you're in an exam room and it's this specific situation. How would you respond? And you have to have memorized that situation and then come in
Mhm.
ready to talk about it and ready to
Yeah.
go. Oh my gosh, Jessica, we could talk for 10 hours because there's so much overlap in this space that I'm sure had our audience scratching their heads as to what we're doing.
I'm like,
Tell
what? What are you doing?
exactly. Tell folks where they can find you.
Right. So I am on Instagram and under the Stagecraft Nerd, the underscore Stagecraft underscore nerd, and also on YouTube by the same handle, the Stagecraft Nerd.
Amazing. Well, I am so thankful that you took this time. I imagine as we get a little closer to interview season that it might be nice to have you come back and us maybe present some questions from our audience. So if you have things that
Absolutely.
you would like Jessica to help us attack, shoot us an email, autumn@gradmissions.org. And if you have questions about how to work with grad missions to make sure that you're ready for your audition to be a future doctor or future lawyer, you can follow us. It's at grad_missions. And we're just so thankful for you coming today, Jessica.
Yes. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Bye, y'all.